ladies and gentlemen, we're back. Of course, it feels so good to be back on the Shreveportant Podcast. We have to say thanks to our friends at Great Raft and their delicious 318 beer. Also, Commotions. We got Commotions left and right. Great Raft, certainly Shreveportant. And it wouldn't be a Shreveportant episode without you. I'm Jay Wadley, and of course, you know this. Every week, we have a Shreveportant guest to talk with, and today, we got a big deal here in this room with me, and I'm excited about it. You know him very well. Ladies and gentlemen, John Montelepre is in the building. John, what is up, man?
Not a whole lot. We're just trying to keep all those fine diners happy, Jay.
Somebody's got to do it.
Somebody's got to do it.
And no one does it as good as you do.
Well, I don't know about that, but I really enjoy what I do. I love touching tables every night and getting a few bottles of wine and hugging all the girls. It's it's kind of a really fun job, but it wasn't always that way, but it is now, and I like it.
I am so excited. I've been trying to get, originally when we launched the Shreveportant Podcast, a lot of people said, well, who do you think you're going to get on? And I gave probably a list of 4 or 5 guys every time. You were always on that list. So I'm pumped that you're here today, and I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
John Montelepre, of course, the owner, the operator of 2Johns, the highest rated steakhouse in the state of Louisiana, maybe even the world. But we're waiting on those rankings to come out. Certainly, I'm a big fan of 2Johns. Before we move on, though, John, I'm sure this is interesting for you. You don't see folks like the Toe often at 2Johns, but the Toe is here today. Hey, Toe.
Hey, Jay. How are y'all doing?
God, you had all this time to think of your first line, and you went with that?
I can't stop thinking about steak.
Now, what would you do if the Toe walked in wearing what he's wearing into your establishment?
Well, being he's a male, we probably have to have a little conversation.
Just a friendly discussion, Toe. Just real friendly.
Now, if he was a female, we might overlook a few things.
We'd let it slide.
Yeah, that's right.
Are you a female, Toe? I've never asked. I'm not sure. I think
you're not allowed to ask that anymore,
That's
Jay.
True. That's a good point. John Montelepre, owner-operator of 2Johns. If you're looking for me, maybe I owe you money. I don't know. I'm easy to find. Every Friday I'm at 2Johns. I love that place. And I always have. I remember, I'll tell you a funny story real quick. When I was a kid, 2Johns was like a magical island, that you could never get to. It was like a castle that you read about. And for years I'd heard of this place, 2Johns. And when I went for the first time, I just remember walking in and being like, I've made it. I'm eating at 2Johns. And that's an absolute true story. I was so excited to get invited. I was excited that at least that day I had enough money in my radio station DJ bank account to be able to afford the bill. But it was just an unreal time. Like, it was magical for me. I remember going for the first time. Do you hear stories like that a lot?
We believe it or not, we do. We have such a great staff at 2Johns, and that's what I think what sets us apart is our people. We have better people than other restaurants, and we have a lot of fun at work too. I probably tease everybody too much, but we have a lot of fun when we open up. We put our game face on and go to work. But it's a fun spot to work.
Well, I think you nailed it too. Just from an outsider looking in, when I go in, everything's flowing copacetically. Everybody, you can tell, as everybody is, fitting that. I don't know if I want to call it like the 2Johns way. I don't know if that's appropriate, but everyone just kind of, they all seem happy to be there. In the service industry, I'm not sure that's the case everywhere, where everyone you see is happy to be in the building.
We have a lot of professionals, and everybody does well at our restaurant. We're really so blessed. We very seldom have a slow night at the restaurant, and the way things have been the last couple of years, that's really remarkable. So we're really blessed. We've got we've been there we're on our 16th year, so we've got a pretty good base now. But we've got great customers that come to our restaurant.
Absolutely.
Really
I can't wait to dive into 2Johns currently, but what I really would like to dive into is John Montelepre, the good old days. Are you born here in Shreveport? Are you
No, actually, I
from?
was born in New Orleans.
Okay.
In Metairie, and I guess when I was when I was in 5th grade, we moved up here. So I don't know, what was that, 11 or 12 years old?
Okay.
My dad actually ran Continental Insurance in New Orleans, and he had like 500 people underneath him. And we had an oil man, Mr. Trahan, up here in Shreveport, offered my dad back in the 60s to actually double his salary to come up here to Shreveport. So that's how we got up here. But Montelepre is a New Orleans name. There's probably 50 or 60 Montelepres down there right now. They're all cousins of mine.
Yeah.
So no, I was born in New Orleans and I've been here since I was about 11 or 12.
So you've been here, since you're 11 and 12, what was that, 10, 15 years ago?
Yeah, about 20 years ago.
Well, you are truly Shreveportant. You've been here for a long time, but a lot of people, hopefully a lot of people already know this, but maybe there are some people that don't know this. 2Johns, certainly not by any means your first foray into dining, into serving here in the Arklatex. Tell me about, well, I want to get into what you did work-wise, but where'd you go to school at, if you don't mind me asking?
I went to high school at Captain Shreve and college at Centenary.
The Gators are in the
Gators.
house. We had a big Bird alum in here, Brett
Well,
Lattin, last
I'm
week.
just going to tell you, I was there in the early 70s, and we whipped Bird's ass every year.
You take that, Yellow Jackets.
There you go. That's
You
right.
see, it's
we
kind of
did
like in the world of politics, when one side gets on like the news or something, then they're obligated to give the other side the free advertising. And so that's kind of what we're doing with Bird and Captain Shreve. I just realized that.
When I was there, the 3 years I was there, we were literally the best sports school in the state. I mean, we went to state in every sport. I played golf. We won state one year in golf. Should have won it the other 2 years. Football, we won state. Baseball, basketball. We just had great athletes
Yeah.
at Shreve when I was there.
Now, forgive me for asking. I do want to talk about your golf because I've heard that you can swing the sticks.
Not anymore.
Well, that's what they all
I'm
say.
a has-been.
Oh, I don't want to know. I'll be the judge of that.
I hadn't played in 20 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I had.
You didn't play football in high school?
No, I never was a football player.
Wow. Did
Got
the
into
coaches?
golf. I was, I say I never was a football player. When I was, I guess at fifth and sixth grade, I played some football, played some baseball too. I played basketball too. I played pretty much all the sports.
Yeah.
And I got introduced to golf late. I guess I was at Uri Drive.
Okay.
And I just got hooked on it.
Yeah.
And I just forgot all the other sports and just played golf.
I think that's and correct me if I'm wrong, because I play golf every week. I am horrible. If I break 90, we have a celebration in the
It'll
clubhouse.
humble you real quick.
Yes. But golf, I think that's, especially at a younger age, I think that's really, not saying that you don't have to dedicate yourself to the other sports, but if you really want to be a great golfer, you have to dedicate I don't think you can do every sport and be a great golfer. I think you just have
Well, the beautiful thing about golf is you never can get too good.
That's true.
And that's the thing that keeps you motivated. I mean, and you go out there one day and shoot, 66, 67, and you go out the next day and shoot 76. And it really humbles you real quick.
Well, I shot a 67 the other day
Front side
on the front nine. Yeah. Hey, how you doing? You heard that one before? Or maybe you've seen my golf game.
No, I just been around the block a few times.
I love it.
I got a few years on you.
It's funny, John. All my friends, they invite me to golf because they know that there's not a bet I'll ever refuse.
Right.
And they know that I've never won a bet.
Right.
So my friends love it when I'm available to go.
If I ever start playing again, you're more than welcome to play with us.
If you're a smart man, I know you are.
I
I
might
got to
need
be
a
your
few
first.
shots, so I'm just telling you.
I think I need 10 aside. I mean, if you haven't, you haven't played in 20 years. That means that all of those bad body tendencies that you maybe had, they're long gone now.
But I
You're
had
fresh.
good body tendencies. That's the thing. I was a scratch player, so that don't
Wow.
work.
Were you great at golf immediately? Like, did you just have a
No,
knack for
not
it?
immediately. I kind of bloomed my junior and senior year in college with golf. I was
Okay.
always decent, but I got to where I got to be a better ball striker my junior and senior year. I always used to scramble a lot. I
Yeah.
used to be able to get the ball up and down a lot, but no, golf just takes work and dedication. I mean, it really does.
Yeah.
And the thing about golf, the way it is today with all the technology and the video and I mean, trackers and all that, if you want to be a great player, you could probably do it in a fourth of the time.
Yeah. I would imagine, when you were getting into golf, you couldn't just go into your garage and pull up a projector screen and hammer away, golf shots on the virtual golf courses. So to get your practice in, you had to go and hit it at the range, right?
Well, when we played bad, our swing went awry, we just have to get on the range and start hitting balls.
Yeah.
And whereas today with all the technology and the trackers and video, it's, if you want to be a good player, you could do it in a fourth of the time, probably.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's insane to think about. You played golf in college?
I went to school on a full golf scholarship. And,
Okay.
I played at Centenary, and I got to play my senior year. Hal Sutton was a freshman, so Hal and I were real close and played a lot of four balls that summer prior to my senior year and his freshman year, and it was really fun. We went from driving everywhere to flying everywhere when Hal came aboard. 'Cause Mr. Sutton took care of us, and
What was that like golfing with Hal Sutton at Centenary? Did everyone know? Could you just tell?
Hal was and still is a great player. In fact, he ate my restaurant last week. He lives in Houston now, and he's got grandkids here, and he comes into town maybe half a dozen times a year. And he always comes and eats. You know, he used to have his own booth when he was here. He eats the same booth every time he'd come. He used to was in pretty much every week. But Hal's one of those great players, you know, and it was fun to play with Hal.
A lot of my friends went to Calvary, and they always talk about they're older by a few years, but they always talk about when Sam Burns came around, and these guys are playing high school golf and they're striping it, and they're the best golfers that I know. These guys.
Sure.
They said when Sam Burns showed up, you knew that there was a different level.
That's right. Well, it's the same thing with Hal. It was the same thing. Yeah. Obviously, I've never played with Sam, but Sam's is a special talent, obviously.
Oh yeah,
So,
insane. Maybe I'd give him a stroke or two.
It's amazing how many good players we've come out of the Shreveport-Bossier area. David Toms, Hal, and Sam Burns, and I'm sure there's a couple others, but those come to mind right away.
We talk about it all the time here on the Shreveportant Podcast. We talked about music last week with Brent Lattin. Shreveport's just a hotbed. It really is a hotbed for talent in general and for really big things outside of the small little bubble that we call the Arklatex. So, but certainly golf, I was never good at it, but I still love it.
Yeah.
When I golf, it's like playing cricket and a mixture between cricket and an Easter egg hunt for 3 hours. You want to go with me one day? It'll be fun.
Well, I hadn't played in 20 years, Jay, but if I ever get swinging again, we'll go out and play around.
Come on, man.
I'm gonna need some shots. So
interesting that you went to college at Centenary. So for a large portion of your life, you lived right there in that area, in that Centenary area on Kings.
I lived in a dorm. Back then, Klein was the athletic dorm, and what was so fun, looking back on it, I had Robert Parrish was my suite mate. Kathy Johnson, the Olympic gymnast, was there when I was there. Of course, Hal Sutton was there. So I was around a lot of famous people at Centenary. And it was a fun time. That school being as small as it was, I think we had about 1,100 students back when I was there. And, being an athlete, it was really something. I mean, you being a small school, you got invited to all of the sorority and fraternity parties.
Yeah.
It was I got it on probation the first semester. It was a lot of playing.
Hang on, I gotta know. I gotta know what John Montelepre did to get on probation at Centenary.
Called miss all the classes.
Well, I guess in the world of a college student, that's not the worst thing.
Well, the thing is, back then when I was in the early '70s, the NCAA didn't have restrictions on how many days you could miss.
Yeah.
I think it's 13 now. We went to Guadalajara, Mexico, and then we had 2 or 3 trips after. We missed like 20 days in a row, and so much so that the Gold Dome had to hire tutors to keep us up to speed. So unlike the state schools that gave their grades to athletes, Centenary didn't give us grades.
Wow.
So we had to work for our grades.
Wow. And, so you had to go and bust it. You're traveling around the country, and then you got to go home to Centenary and really work after it to get the grades where they need to be.
To me too, looking back, I don't think they should let you join a fraternity or sorority your freshman year, because that first year it's such a big adjustment away from your parents, and of course being an athlete, I had to be on the golf course at 1:00 every day, and so all my classes were early, and of course you pledge a fraternity and you're out partying, and of course I wasn't a morning person, so I missed that first semester. I didn't make many classes.
Wow. You got the groove of it. You got in the groove.
But I had that second semester was a different story.
Yeah.
I had to make a 3.0 to get off probation and save my scholarship. My dad couldn't afford to send me to Centenary. And so I buckled down, dropped the fraternity, and actually made a 3.3 and got off probation. And so
that's awesome. You did that. You did that, of course, thinking of your dad, but knowing that you had a lot on the line
knowing
already.
that if I didn't get off, I was gone.
Yeah.
I didn't. It's kind of like I didn't have much of a choice. You just had to do what you had to do.
So tell me, what did you major there at Centenary? What did you major in?
Well, Centenary's a liberal arts school, and I actually was a PE major, which, generally people laugh when you say that, but I still had to take all the maths and the Englishes because it's a liberal arts school. So I was a PE major pretty much.
Let me just say this: no matter what you major at Centenary, no one should ever laugh at you for getting.
Well, like I say, it was at one time. I don't know if it still is. It was one of the toughest, liberal arts schools in the country.
Of course,
and especially at the English department. The English department was something else.
So, explain to me, how did you get into the restaurant world? Was that quick after college, or
pretty quick?
Maybe even during?
Pretty quick. I was I wanted to play professional golf, Jay, and the problem I had, I worked as assistant pro at Eastridge the first year, and Orrin Whittington, who was the pro there, was the only. They said I was the only guy he let play golf and work in the pro shop. I had to be, I think at the pro shop at maybe 12 or 1. I'd get up every morning and go play golf and work on my game, and I was a good player, but I was going to have some help to go to the next level, and. After doing that a little while, and it was really kind of crazy. My dad used to eat at a place called Leon's. My dad was in the insurance business, had his own agency called Montelepre Insurance Agency. And I tried to sell insurance a couple of summers. It just wasn't my deal. And one day he said, he ate over there every day with Mr. Leon, got to know Mr. Leon. One day he looked at me and said, "Hey, what do you think about going to the restaurant business?" I said, "What are you talking about?"
Wow.
And he said, "It's a true story." And he said, it just blew me away because I didn't have.
How old are you here?
How old am I? Oh, well, I'm in college, so I guess I'm a senior. So I'm probably 20, in my early 20s anyway.
Wow.
But just out of the blue, one day, Dad says, what do you think about going to restaurant business? I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, I've got to know Mr. Leon pretty well, and he wants to sell this restaurant and open another one." He said, "Do you have a problem with coming down and sitting with him and looking at the books and all that?" I said, "I don't have a problem going and sit and look at the books, Dad." I said, "But I don't know if I want to be a restaurateur, And so when I went, we had our meeting.
Wow.
Leon had a little small place on Kings Highway. It was 14 stools.
Yeah.
And back when Leon had it, he smoked cigars. You walk in there, the whole place has got some cigar smoked, and the whole place, it'd be packed every time you go in there. But service was slow, and so anyway, I looked at the books. And I didn't know anything about the restaurant business, but I saw the numbers he was doing, and he did no catering, no shipping, or this and that. And I said, something, if he can do these kind of numbers, operating the way he's operating, with his food as good as it is, I think I might give this a shot. And Mr. Leon kind of took me under his wing. He treated me like his son.
So you had a mind for it, though. You could look at those books and see. You could look at books and say he's doing something right, and he's not even doing this, and this.
I've always been good with numbers, and I mean, I just and I knew how far a dollar went because I had 2 jobs in college and had to be on the golf course at 1 o'clock. I attended bar on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights, and I threw 600 newspapers every morning. And on Sunday, I threw 900. So I knew how far a dollar went.
Yeah.
And then when I went and looked at his books, and I saw how much money he was making operating the way he was operating, and I just felt like, if he could do that the way he's operating, I could operate a lot better. Start doing some catering, start shipping some hens and turkeys, and I said, I'm gonna give it a shot. So
I definitely want to talk about your relationship with Leon. So your dad got into the business, correct? Though is that?
No, actually, Dad helped me get
Okay.
in the business, and then when I decided did that and decided not to go in the insurance business, it kind of broke his heart that I didn't come with him and go in the insurance business with him, because the problem he had back in the early '70s, pre-computer, was he had like 3 or 4 girls in the office just doing paperwork, and he was so bogged down he couldn't get out and sell. So he wanted me to come to where one of us could get out and get on the street and sell, and another person run the office. Well, it just wasn't my deal. And I told him, I said, "Dad," I said, I sold a few policies. I said, "This isn't what I want to do, though." And so he helped me get in the restaurant business, and then he came with me, and then we opened, Mr. Leon, Dad, and I opened Monkhouse Drive shortly after I got in at Kings Highway. And
Well, that's just tell me real quickly about your relationship with Mr. Leon. I love that you call him that to this day.
Well, he was so good to me.
Yeah.
And I mean, in fact, when he finally built the other restaurant, actually we had he built one out on Southland Park before the Monkhouse Drive store, and he would still come and sit in there every day, so people didn't know it changed hands. He did it for 6 months, and then finally, when he couldn't be there anymore, people were so used to seeing me, and so it wasn't that big a deal.
It just worked.
It just worked, and
transition.
But he was really good to me.
How old was he roughly at that time?
He opened that restaurant, Jay, when he was like 67 years old. He just opened it for something to do. And Leon was one of these guys that he could throw anything together and make it taste good. I mean, he had the barbecue sauce that we use today at 2Johns that was from Leon's, was his recipe. He had great tamales, great hot tamales he sold out of that restaurant as well. It wasn't barbecue. He just was really good at putting stuff together.
Yeah.
Making it taste good. Just had a knack for it. And it kind of snowballed on him. And that's what happened.
Yeah. So all these years later, do you think there's still, how often do you think of him? How often do you think about the things maybe that he taught you? And
Well,
do you ever have a moment of saying, man,
I was in the barbecue business for 30 years, and and that's a long time. And but I don't think about him much anymore. I used to think about him a lot, obviously, but he was really, really good to me.
Yeah.
In fact, a lot of people thought he was my dad. But yeah, he was a good man.
So you said that originally when your dad talked to you about the idea of getting in at Leon's, you said that Mr. Leon was already thinking about opening that second place. So was that already a plan?
Well, that's why he was interested in selling the East Kings Highway store. He wanted to go open another store, and that's why he was willing to entertain selling that store.
Yeah. So tell me about that. Tell me about opening the second Leon's, doing that with your dad and with Leon.
Well,
himself.
we opened Leon when I bought the East Kings Highway store. He went and did Southland Park, and then eventually made that a franchise, which I had to take away from that lady down the road. That's another story. But anyway, Dad, Leon, and I did Monkhouse, and at the time, Dad and I didn't know much about restaurant locations, so we pretty much went and did whatever Leon said to do as far as locations. At the time, Monkhouse was supposed to have a big old shopping center right across the street from our strip center, and that never materialized, and everything went up on Pines Road. We always made money at Monkhouse, but it wasn't the restaurant we thought it was going to be.
Well, with the airport there as well.
We always made money, but it never really we thought it was going to be a really, really good restaurant, and money wise, and it never really materialized. And then, when Dad retired, I ran Kings Highway and Monkhouse for a couple of years. We had video poker machines out there too at Monkhouse, and did really well with those. But after a couple of years, I felt like it wasn't worth my time. I was spending, and so we owned that property. We finally closed the restaurant and sold that property, and just concentrated on that one location. And of course, what happened was, everything started going to South Shreveport, and I kind of saw it like 5 years out, and I tried to relocate the restaurant.
How did you see that coming? Was it the development?
I could just see it. There was just more and more going South Shreveport, and our location was getting. I still did a pretty good business, but I could just see that it was all going south of town.
Yeah,
and that's where I needed to be. And by the time I bought an acre of land and built my restaurant, it was going to cost me $2 million. And I had a $5 sandwich. I couldn't make the numbers work.
Wow.
And so, so I got out of the restaurant business, closed that store, and started doing something else, and thought I was done. Until little John decided to be a chef out of college, and so that kind of changed everything.
Well, I can't wait to get into this one, because this is where the story really picks up. But before we get into it, I got to say thanks, of course, to John Montelepre for being our Shreveportant guest this week. Thank you to Great Ralph for providing these 318s. Thank you for the Toe for wearing clothes under his robe today. Toe, I do appreciate that, brother.
I'm glad I'm not naked either.
Yeah, it's been rough, because he doesn't have a tablecloth. We can see everything under there. It's been kind of rough the last couple weeks.
Speak for yourself, brother.
But so you got out of the restaurant business, so it wasn't maybe in your heart at that point yet. I mean, obviously you've been doing Leon's. How long do you think from beginning to end of Leon's? How long was that? What was that time period?
That was from we closed the store, and I guess I don't know if it was 04 or 05.
Okay.
I thought I was done with the restaurant business, but the Lord had other plans for me.
So tell me about little John getting out of college, and he calls you. Does he call you? Does he talk to you about it?
No, it's actually a long story.
Yeah.
John actually was at Tech. He was in business and entrepreneurship was his major. But John had a couple of restaurant jobs on the side. I paid for, he was on tops for his tuition, but I paid for his dorm. And after the first year, he was rooming with a couple guys at a house. I paid that and his car note and his insurance and all that. So John just did restaurant jobs to have spending money.
Okay.
So the restaurant business really never got out of his blood. He helped me when he was younger at Leon's at Christmas time and Thanksgiving time. In fact, it was so funny. Morgan and John, they'd carry we put these turkeys or hams in bags, and they'd carry them out to the car, and people would give them $1. I mean, they were little, and that was a big deal for them.
Huge deal for them.
Yeah, but
what was that like, if you don't mind me asking? What was that like seeing your littles get involved in the business with you, knowing your relationship with Leon and your dad?
He really didn't get, I say he got involved. Morgan and John pretty much just helped at Christmas and Thanksgiving time.
Okay.
Because they were just real young.
Yeah.
And but it was kind of in his blood, I guess, a little bit. And then of course he went to Tech, and he had a couple restaurant jobs on the side. And what actually happened the summer prior to his senior year, my buddy Phil Barberie that owns Superior Steakhouse asked John if he wanted to work as learn to be a pastry chef. And John said, yeah, I'll give it a shot, and so he trained, I think, there was a pastry chef there at Superior already. I think John trained under him that summer and really enjoyed the job.
Yeah.
And in fact, so much so, after the 3 months that he worked for Phil called me one day and said, you ought to push your son to go to culinary school. And I said, well, Phil, I said, I'm not going to push John to go to culinary school, but he said, well, he gets along with everybody. He's got a lot of talent, and I think he really would have a future. And I said, well, you may be right. I said, but I'm not going to push him. Well, so I kind of forgot about that. John went and finished his senior year at Tech, and then I guess he wasn't out of college maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and John called me one day, and he said, Dad, he said, guess who called me? I said, who? He said, Mr. Barberie. I said, well, what did he want? He said, well, he offered me a job to go, to be a pastry chef, and I can't remember the numbers. It was a big salary compared to John making minimum wage.
Of course.
And I told John, I said, I thought you were kind of burned out on restaurant business. He said, no, not really. I just never was paid what I thought I was worth. And like I said, I can't remember what the number was, but it was a pretty good number that Phil offered him.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, look, you want to do it? Give it a try. And I said, after 3 or 4 months, if it ain't your bag, just tell Phil this isn't my deal, and it just kind of took off, And
So you told Phil originally that you weren't going to push that. You weren't going to push him in a direction of any kind.
I just didn't believe in pushing my son.
I was going to ask, is this maybe a parental deal?
No, I'm going to let him do what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
And but as it turned out, and really culinary school, like, our chef at 2Johns, Josh Wilkinson, he went to culinary school, and he's a cordon bleu chef, but he'll tell you that 3 or 4 years he was there, they didn't really teach him that much. It's all about getting that certificate, so you can make, big dollars being a chef. So really, not going to culinary school, it's not that really big a deal. I mean, it's either in your blood or it's not.
Right.
And obviously it's in John's blood. But so anyway, so he worked, John worked, and Josh was the executive chef at the time too. So John worked under Josh at Superior for 3 years, and then I think he wound up being a pastry chef / sous chef at the time. And I think everything was pretty good for about 3 years. And then I think Phil decided to open at lunch. It was just a nighttime place, kind of like we are, and decided to open for lunch, and I think John and Josh got working a lot of hours more than they wanted. And they decided that they were going to, they decided they didn't want to work that many hours. And so John was fixing to move to Austin. And, I think he had a friend or two there. And, I really wasn't that crazy about him moving, because he really didn't know what he wanted to do and this and that. And I always wanted to do a fine dining restaurant, and so I just told him one day, I said, let's go do a restaurant. And he looked at me and said, are you serious?
Wow.
I said, yeah, I'm serious. He said, well, what kind of restaurant are you going to do? Me being in a barbecue business. I said, well, look, you're a sous chef. I said, I'll hire a chef out of New Orleans or somewhere. And I said, let's go do a steakhouse. And so that was kind of how the idea started. And
how long was that in your mind before you finally decided? Like, I know you weren't 100% on it, but how long can you recall the first moment where that was a possibility in your head?
Not really.
Okay.
Not really. Because I was doing some other things, and that was the last thing in my mind. But,
yeah.
And he was doing well at Superior and liked it. And so, it just, all of a sudden, when they started doing lunch, John just didn't want to work that many hours, and
Yeah.
so
Wow.
Talk
So
about-
it was really like because of the extra hours, he comes to you and says something has to change, and then bam.
well, he was
This-
actually going to move to Austin.
Yeah.
And like I say, he had a friend or two up there, but wasn't sure what he was going to do. And when I heard that, I told my wife, I said, I said, I always wanted to do a fine dining. And see,
Yeah.
and Dad and I we loved each other, but we weren't close. Dad and I
Okay.
couldn't work together. John and I are close. And so, it's really special to work with your son. And,
Do you think that's because maybe your dad and you are not so close? Do you think you made that a priority when it came to raising yours?
Absolutely. The mistakes Dad made with me, I made sure I didn't make them with John. So it was one of those learning experiences. My dad was a really good man. He was a real smart man. He just never thought he was wrong. One of those kind of things, And,
I do, yeah.
I mean, I was right occasionally, but he was hard. He was hard to work with, but I loved him.
Yeah,
very
of course.
much. He
No, of
loved me
course.
too. But
Yeah.
but John and I are both kind of laid back, and I made sure I didn't make those mistakes with my son. And I don't know if they were mistakes my dad made, but it made it tough on our relationship. Of
course.
So, but
I have two little daughters myself. I think about that all the time. I think, the relationship I have with my dad, it's really, for me, it's pretty cut and dry. Do the opposite and you'll be all right. And so,
yeah, so that's
I had
kind
to
of how
ask.
that's
Yeah.
kind of how it came about. We started thinking about a restaurant and started looking for locations. And
Well, I got to ask you this. The name is so iconic. It's great.
Well,
when did that happen?
Our last name, we're Sicilian. Our name's Montelepre, and we couldn't call it Montelepres because we weren't going to be an Italian place.
Okay,
So we were
yeah.
trying to think of some name to where it kind of was a family name, and we came up with 2Johns. In fact, I wanted to do the letter 2, and my wife I think my wife, I'm not sure if John, but my wife wanted to spell it out TWO. I said no. I said the letter 2 will be first in all the phone book and everything, and I said it's different.
Wow.
That's about the only argument I ever
Oh,
won with my
that's
wife,
so
by the way.
smart.
But
Yeah.
but
That was the only hill that you were willing to die on, right?
but that so that's how the 2Johns, because I'm John Montelepre Jr., he's John Montelepre III. We have this, both of us have the same name. My dad was John Montelepre Sr. So
yeah.
anyway, so that's kind of how the name came about.
That's great. That's so funny. That's the question that I've been waiting to ask this whole time. Is I just got to know the conversation. But that's interesting. I never thought about whether it being spelled out or just a number. But yeah, 16 years ago, the number 2 being in front, Ned definitely put it in the front of everything.
Everything. That's right.
It's genius.
Yeah. Sure.
How'd you land that location? Tell me about
Well,
that.
this is another thing. In fact, I was having lunch the other day with a really good chef, and I'm having one of these brain farts right now. Can't think of his name. I'll come back to that story. But
If he's watching, you're a good chef.
yeah,
That's
he
all that
is,
matters,
and
that he remembers
Yeah,
that.
and he's going to see this and be disappointed in me. But at the time, Shreveport had like 10 white tablecloth restaurants. At the time we were looking at doing this, and Bossier really didn't have one. They had Little Italiana, which was an Italian place, a little small restaurant, but we were going to be a steakhouse. And, John and I both live in Shreveport, even still today, and obviously we wanted to open in Shreveport. And one day I told my son, John was 25 back then, and I said, son, we need to be in Bossier. And he said, why, Dad? I said, because we're going to be the only game in town, son. I said, we'll draw Shreveporters over. Now, I never dreamed I'd draw as many Shreveporters as we do today. Today, probably the last 3 to 5 years, my restaurants have Shreveport every night.
Yeah.
I never dreamed I'd pull that many over. But so
how do you think how do you pull, because Shreveport, I hear that all the time. Like, what do you think makes a Shreveporter decide to cross that bridge and go? Like, what do you think?
good food, good service, and good cocktails, and good live music.
Yeah.
We just, I think one of the things that have separated our restaurant is, like we talked about earlier, I have a great staff. Everybody enjoys working there. And we just work harder than everybody else. We outwork these other restaurants. And just in little ways. But you add all those little things up and it kind of separates you. So, it's kind of like I say, if you're from Shreveport and you come for the first time, if we do our job, we're going to get you.
Every time, yeah, you'll come back.
If we do our job, we're going to get you. So,
So you knew you had, did you have to convince Little John about opening in Bossier, or was it more like when you
No, not
spelled
really.
it out?
He was
it
pretty
just made
much on
sense?
board, as I remember, because he realized what I was saying too. I said, why do you want to open a restaurant where you got, you got 10 other people that's competition, where you can be over in Bossier and have no competition?
Yeah.
And I said,
And at that time, hopefully pull from Shreveport.
and I knew we'd pull some, Shreveport's over there, but yeah, it was a no-brainer for me. But I've always been, real good with common sense. I mean, to me, I've always been kind of common sense smart, street smart, not very book smart, and business smart. And so that was just a no-brainer, and I said, we need to be in Bossier.
Well, it's an iconic storefront there on Airline Drive. Was that building already there, or was it
When I
built?
saw that building, it had been there for about a year or two vacant.
Okay.
It was just four walls and dirt. And when I saw that building, I told my son, I said, there's our restaurant right there. And yeah, they left it unfinished. So it took us 14 months to build it out. So whoever wanted to go in there
Could take it and make it theirs.
Make it theirs and have it lay out the way they wanted to have it laid
14
out.
months. It took 14 months to go from that moment to opening doors.
Yeah.
What do you remember of that night, opening night?
Well, the first 2 days we had two soft openings where we invited a bunch of people and just fed them for free, kind of to get the name out there. It's kind of, instead of spending money advertising, this was the way you're advertised, and let them come and eat and then go talk about it. So the first 2 nights we actually had soft openings, and the third night we opened to the public. And I really can't remember that far back, Jay, exactly how my feelings. Of course, you were excited about it, obviously.
I was wondering if there's maybe a moment or two of the night that just comes back to your head of, I can't imagine, there's so much that goes into that. And like you said, it's over a year of a process from finding a building to opening the doors and it being 2Johns and having no clue what 2Johns is going to end up being years down the line. Just, do you recall any moment, maybe even a moment of fear or anything
it's
like
funny
that?
you mentioned that. I'll never forget, we were about 3/4 of the way through the build out. And of course, it cost us twice what we thought it was going to cost. And my son looked at me one day. He said, "Dad, what if we don't make it?" And I said, "Son, put that completely out of your mind. We're going to make it." And I said, "If it takes me, you, John, and me, you, Josh, and Stacy. Stacy's my front of house manager. Josh was our executive chef at the time. I said, if it takes the 4 of us just to run this place, I said, we're going to make it." Okay. I said, just forget that completely.
Yeah.
And of course, I didn't know. I thought we were going to make it, but big gamble. I thought back then, though, the thing I did know about the restaurant business was that customer, white collar customer, it didn't matter. And things were real tough in 2009. You're too young to remember, but money was tighter in 2009. I think maybe might have been the tightest in my life in the year 2009 when we opened up. I mean, you could not, I always had great credit. They weren't letting you buy much on credit.
Wow.
I mean, it was tough.
I remember I went to college in 2009, and this is, I guess, the one way that, I was already in radio, but I was making, I was making $7.25 an hour at the time.
Right.
I moved to Destin, Florida, and I was doing a radio show in Destin on the party station Fly 92.1. I was Speedo J, by the way. I'd wear Speedos everywhere. It was awesome. Don't look up those photos. But my college was in Panama, and I didn't realize that those two were not like Shreveport and Bossier. I thought they were across. No, it's an hour and 15 down the road. And the only thing I remember when it comes to the economy and money about 2009, gas was like $5 a gallon in 2009.
It was tough. But
Went to college for 3 days.
The one thing I knew about the customer with that white collar guy, no matter how hard things were, he was going to come get that steak and that drink. Okay. And we also had a bar attached to the restaurant. And, when things are good, people drink. When things are bad, people drink.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we definitely were kind of out there a little bit, but I always had good work ethic, and John has good work ethic, and we were going to make it one way or the other. And
Can you tell me then if you can think from that moment to whenever the answer is? So from opening night to when was maybe the night, maybe the month, maybe the moment that you and both Little John realized, like, wait a second, we totally made it. Like, we're 2Johns.
well, I tell you, we've been so blessed, Jay. I mean, we opened our doors in August of '09, and we actually were fairly busy when we first opened up. I mean, not like we are today, obviously, but fairly busy, and kind of, we had Christmas right around the corner, and what really surprised me or helped us is that we sold a ton of gift cards in December. In fact, I didn't see that coming. And it really was like the Lord, giving us all this money to kind of, because things are tight when you first open up, especially fine dining, and you don't have a base in a small market like we have, because, it takes you a while to build that base for a fine dining restaurant, because not everybody can afford to come. We do a lot of birthdays, anniversaries, and there's not many guys that can come, 2 or 3 nights a week on a regular basis. Yeah. Although, 16 years later, we have a bunch of those.
Right.
So that was really like a godsend, all those gift cards we sold in December.
Do you think that was, from your perspective, was that just, all right, we are definitely doing something right? Like, well, this is the proof right here.
I thought we were doing something right to start.
Yeah.
What really helped me is I did not know fine dining, but the people around me all knew it. I had my front of house manager that was fine dining manager. Obviously, Josh was a chef fine dining. John had worked in fine dining. And I put people around me, and I was a pretty quick study. It didn't take me long to learn it. And so we had professionals, really good people around me. And we were ready when we opened up. I mean, we had 3 table sections in the restaurant. The first 6 months, they have 5 table sections now. I sat down with Stacy, and we decided, I said, look, we got one shot at these people here. The service has got to be perfect. I said, we're going to do 3 table sections. We might not do that. We might not make much money the first 6 months. I said, but, we got one shot at these people. And so that's what we did. We had 3 table sections for our servers. And then finally, 6 months down the road, we went to 4 and 5 table sections. But when we opened, we were ready. A lot of these restaurants, when they open up, they're not ready.
Well, that was my next question. What do you think the restaurants that maybe obviously don't have the 16-year lifespan, obviously don't hit the ground running, what do you think they do wrong? What do you think is the biggest mistake a lot of restaurateurs, maybe young restaurateurs, make in the Arklatex?
You really have to do almost everything right and be kind of lucky. I mean, first of all, you have to have a great location, and like we got 40,000 cars that go by, on airline every day. A lot of people put themselves behind the 8 ball because location's not that good, or they don't have enough backing behind them. They spend all their money to get open, and all of a sudden, the first 3 or 4 or 5 months, the first 2 or 3 months are good because everybody's going to try you, but then when it levels off 4 or 5 months later, they might have some lean months till they grow that base, and they don't have the financing to stick in there.
Wow.
There's a lot of things too. I mean, it's just a lot of things you have to do well. And like I say, on top of that, then you have to be a little lucky.
Yeah.
So, it's a challenging business, that's for sure.
What is the biggest difference between 2Johns in 2024 and 2Johns in 2009?
Our base. We've got a huge base now, and that makes a big, big difference.
Yeah.
I mean, LSU football still hurts us some, but the first 2 or 3 years, it seemed like all our customers were LSU ticket holders.
Wow.
And the first 2 or 3 years when LSU played, they were real good back then.
Yeah.
too.
So Saturday night in Baton Rouge, you got an empty house.
It was brutal.
Wow.
But that base means everything. I was saying, we're so blessed. We very seldom have slow nights at 2Johns. Very seldom.
I want to brag about Josh. His name has been brought up quite a bit. Josh Wilkinson is a good friend of mine. Our friendship was just burgeoning. It was a early friendship going, and I was taking a dinner at 2Johns one night by the wedding venue that I was working for. I do an all-inclusive wedding venue called St. Pierre in Benton. Beautiful wedding venue, and I do all their DJ work. And we were in the middle of a negotiation at this point. We all went out to dinner at 2Johns. Picked me up in a limo. I said, what is this? I love this. It's awesome. But we went to 2Johns and we ate. And towards the end of it, because I never want to be that guy to text somebody while they're working. I know what it's like, doing nightclubs or anything like that. You get people that just don't want to wait in line. So they just text you and you haven't heard from this person in 2 years. And they're like, hey, how are your kids? Are they doing great? Oh, by the way, we're coming tonight after the concert. Can we get in for free? So I never want to appear like that person.
Right.
But I texted Josh because I knew he was working. I said, I know you're busy. If you just get a moment, it would make me look pretty good if you just said hello to my table. And no joke, packed night. Maybe it was a Friday night, but I mean, it was packed in there. And maybe 4 minutes later, Josh came out and he just went above and beyond, and he gave out hats, 2Johns hats to the table, and introduced himself. And I totally guarantee you that interaction locked in my contract. Like, I was in with them for years after that because it meant a lot to them, and it was just cool. So I have to give him props on that. He didn't have to do it, and I will remember that. But
Well, I'll tell you a funny story about that. I've always touched tables from day one in the restaurant because I know how important it is.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody likes to be recognized, even myself. And so and of course, it was fun for me too to get the feedback from the customers. But the first couple of years, I told Josh, I said, look, when you're not busy in the kitchen, I want you in the dining room. And it was like pulling teeth trying to get him out there.
yeah,
And this went on for a couple of years. One day he and I were back in the office. He looked at me. He said, I finally understand what you're telling me. I finally see how important that is. And ever since then, he's out there as much. If he's working, he's out there in the dining room just like I am.
yeah.
And it's a huge deal because, I mean, where else are you going to go? And the owner and the executive chef are out in the restaurant talking to customers.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen.
It means a lot to those customers.
It means
too.
a lot.
Like, you can't,
Well, it's like
can't
people
stress that enough.
People tell me all the time, I said, John, if we go somewhere else, we're just a number. We come here, not only do you know our name, know what we drink, we feel like we're family. And it's all about relationships. And that's the deal, is what we do probably better than anybody in this market is relationships with customers. And,
Yeah.
It's a real big deal.
Do you want to know something really crazy? And I'm sure this is not news to you, but that's not necessarily tied to an age thing. I went to 2Johns. I don't know if you remember this. This was during the summer. I went with my daughter on a Friday for lunch. And I'm telling her, I'm like, you're going to meet Josh. It's going to be great. And maybe you even get to meet Big John. And she said, who's Big John? I said, well, here's the deal. I'm not going to tell you who it is. When we get in here, I want to see if you can figure out who Big John is. So my daughter's in 4th grade. She's 9 years old. We're sitting down, we're eating. And she looks over and she goes, is that Big John? And she points right at you. I said, it is. Now, I'm not going to bug him, but maybe at some point we'll talk to him.
I'm a pretty big guy, okay?
Maybe, well, and in that room, her dad's 5'7", so pretty much anyone is big, anybody.
Right.
If their dad says they're big.
Right.
But no more than 10. Like, it was so funny just when I told her, I said, I'm not going to bug him, but I'm sure at some point he'll come over and we'll get to meet him. And just as fate would have it, I mean, you work in the room, and I see you work in the room, and within 5 minutes after saying her that, she's having a conversation with her, and you just said, and you treated her like a human, like an adult, and we left. She just ate the most delicious meal of her whole life, and she was like, I can't believe Big John came up and talked to me. So it's like, I think that's just a human nature thing to be acknowledged, no matter the age, but just to be acknowledged.
Everybody
as a
likes
person.
to be acknowledged. Everybody likes to be recognized. And that's what, and that's why I try and do what I do. And even some nights I don't feel like doing it, and I kind of make myself do it. Because and it never fails. I'm so glad after it happens because I touch a table to where first time here, or they got some questions, or it's somebody I met for the first time, that somebody I needed to meet, or that it really almost works out perfect every night doing that. So.
If you would have been told when you stepped away from Leon's and you went off to pursue other things, if you were told then that years from now, all the way into 2024 and beyond, you'd be running the #1 highest rated steakhouse in the state of Louisiana, would you believe that?
Probably not.
What would you say to that guy?
Well, I thought I was done with the restaurant business. I thought I was through.
Yeah.
And so no, I wouldn't have believed that. No. But, the Lord has plans for all of us, and a lot of times we don't know what those plans are. So, like I said, we've been very, very blessed in our restaurant.
Tell me, where do you see 2Johns being down the road? What's next? Where do you see maybe 10 years from now?
Well, we've expanded twice, Jay. Extended it after the first year. We put the second room on there where we do parties on the front right, and then pre-COVID we did the wine cellar and the courtyard and the inside patio. So believe it or not, we seat 300 people now, which I never thought we'd have a restaurant in Bossier City that's at 300.
Yeah.
But I just see us continue to grow our base and get back. You can never be too good. And the thing I love about our restaurant is that, Josh always has a feature or two off the menu, and then the bar, we always have featured drinks. And so we're always changing things up, which I think is so important in our industry.
Yeah.
Because we have a lot of people that come 2 or 3 times a week, and, I hate it when you go to restaurants, the same menu every time you walk in there. And that's what I love about our restaurant. We've always got things working where if you are one of those guys that come 2 or 3 times a week, we've got different dishes for you
Something
to try.
totally different to
Different drinks for you
experience,
to try. And I love that about our restaurant. And so I just see us continue to grow and get better.
Tell me, if you can, I know that I certainly know Little John too, both of you could, you haven't obviously up to this point, but you certainly could have easily at some point in your lives dug in your feet elsewhere outside of Shreveport. What do you believe is, what makes Shreveport a place that you want to call home, a place that you want to continue to build, and a place that you want to continue to serve? Why Shreveport?
Well, actually we're in Bossier, but
I say it every episode. This is the Shreveportant Podcast. I say it every week that Bossierant just doesn't sound as good.
Yeah.
So forgive me on that. But
That's all right.
obviously just the architects, the community, and you a Shreveport lifer.
John and I have lived in Shreveport our lives, and it's a great city. The thing I really like about Bossier City is that Bossier City is the way Shreveport was 30, 40 years ago.
Okay.
And that's what I love about Bossier City. I mean, I know, I've gotten to know everybody in Bossier, and it's just like a good old boys network. I mean, it's just, we feel like we've got a Cheers bar in our restaurant, and, a lot of night, especially Friday lunch, when you come, almost anybody that's anybody in Bossier is in our restaurant. From the mayor to the sheriff to all the councilmen. I mean, it's a Friday night is Friday lunch is kind of a spot. In fact, I'll never forget our mayor he came and asked me prior to him running. He wanted my advice on what he should do, and I said, well, if I were you, I would be in my restaurant every Friday lunch in the main dining room, and that's what he did.
Wow.
And if you would have known him better, you thought he owned the restaurant, and it made a big difference because everybody that's anybody in Bossier is in our restaurant for lunch.
Well, and for him, I'm sure that helped immensely because he's working the room essentially. He walks in and
that's exactly what he did.
I love it. I'm so happy you said that. When I go on Fridays, it's so cool to me because when I walk in, I never know who else is going to be there, and it's just so cool to realize that somebody or tables 6, 7 of the tables. It's just nice. You look around and you're like, this is just where I want to be.
And our Friday lunches too, the last probably 5 years have really just blown up. I mean, we used to do, 5 years ago, we'd do, if we had a good lunch, we might do 125, maybe 150 covers.
Yeah.
We, on a regular basis, do 200 covers to 250 covers in a restaurant, and occasionally we'll do 300 for lunch.
Yeah.
And I mean, in Bossier City, that's a lot of folks.
Huge number.
It's
always packed every Friday.
That's a lot of folks. Yeah, we're packed pretty much every Friday.
I can tell you how I found out about it, and I'm gonna give him some love. He's a friend of mine, Patrick Netherton. I remember where I was the day I found out 2Johns was open for lunch on Fridays, and I have been hard pressed to miss a Friday since then. But this was years ago. I was at my previous radio company, and maybe 10 o'clock in the morning, Patrick comes down the hall and he says, "Hey, I don't know if you've had this burger at 2Johns, but they serve it on Fridays at lunch, and you got to try it." I'm a simple man. I hear a burger, and I go, "Toe, you agree, right? You never miss out on
Toe loves an amazing burger.
Toe texted me yesterday. He said, best burger in the Arklatex. I said, 2Johns, Fridays, go. Be there.
It's probably one of the best kept secrets, because you don't think about it. So we only do lunch on Fridays, so it's not like we do lunch every day. And being a fine dining restaurant, you really don't think about lunch. But the reason that burger's so good, I know Josh has told you, we use all prime steaks, and we trim those steaks during the week. We take those trimmings and grind them up and make a hamburger patty. And so that's why it's so good and has so much flavor. You're eating a prime steak burger is what you're eating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Without the prime steak price tag.
There you go.
Right?
There you go.
I think the next renovation for 2Johns should be a podcast room. We can build out a podcast set. How do you feel about that?
I really hadn't given much thought to that, Jay.
Do you have Fireball kegs at 2Johns? You got any of these laying around?
We have Fireball, but I don't think we have any kegs yet. But maybe that's something to come. We do have Fireball, though.
I'm just here to help. I'm here to help how I can.
That's a great idea. Yeah, great idea.
I want to say certainly you are Shreveportant, but beyond important to the Bossier community, but also the Arklatex as a whole. I think I can speak for the community when I say that they're so grateful, and we're so grateful that you chose to bear down here and to do what you do here, certainly with your son, and what you did at Leon's, what you're doing at 2Johns, what you'll continue to do at 2Johns. It's amazing, and we're lucky to have you here in the Arklatex.
Well, our customers are so great. We have the greatest customers in the world. I mean, it's unbelievable how many faces I see in that restaurant every night that are the same faces. I mean, it really makes you smile. It really does. Yeah.
It's the final question. Thank you for your time. I know it's been a while, but thank you for sticking along. If you want a shot of Fireball, I got plenty of it. I ask every guest this question, all right? Tell me, if you can, the worst thing about being you, the worst thing about being John Montelepre, and also tell me the best thing about being John.
Gee whiz.
You know, it's good if you got to think about the worst thing. That's a good thing, by the way.
Well,
that's not a problem. So don't think that that's a problem.
Boy, that's something. The worst thing about being me. I'm sure there's a lot of worse things, but off the top of my head, I really can't think of anything.
That's good. That's probably the best answer anyone can give, right?
I don't know. I'm just saying. I'm sure if I had a minute to think about it.
If somebody asked me that question, I would write a novel. I would have a Harry Potter-sized novel written in 30 seconds.
I mean, like I said, if I had a few minutes to think about it, I'm sure I could come up with numerous things. But off the top of my head, I really can't come up with anything. That's unusual for me because I feel like I'm pretty quick-witted, and but not.
Listen, I mean it. That's honestly, that's a great thing, and there's a lot of people you ask that question to, and they immediately say, "Well, the worst thing about me is this," and it's or being me. And it's great. I think that just speaks to, to your success and your ability to thrive here in the Arklatex community, which you've always done. Best thing about being Big John,
I guess, at my age is that and still working. I'm doing what I love to do, and that's probably the best thing. I mean, I look forward to going to work every day, and I'm not a young man anymore, and so that's a fun thing for me.
I don't care what they say, dude. 35 is still young. I don't care what they say.
We, that's the thing is like, a few years back, my son asked me, he said, "Dad, how much longer are you going to work?" I said, "I'm going to work until I don't have my health or don't enjoy coming up." I said, "As long as I enjoy coming up and I've got my health, I'm going to work." So hopefully that'll be a while. But I'm really, really blessed because I love what I do. So,
it shows. And like I said, we're thankful to have you. I'm thankful to have you on the Shreveportant Podcast today.
Well, thank you.
Hopefully we get to chat again soon. I'm sure I'll see you on Friday. But you are, I say it every week, if this man right here is not Shreveportant, then no one is Shreveportant. Thank you, of course, John Montelepre, for coming in today. And I'm going to hold you to that golf deal. All right?
Okay, Jay, I'm going to hold you to the strokes, too. I'm going to need some strokes.
I'll give you 3 aside.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Man.
It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.